Hello, class. This is Dr. Fisher. I'm going to give you just a few tips, some do's and don'ts for that matter, of APA style formatting. Now, some of this stuff you already know, and then there are some things that you don't know. And I noticed that as I was going through grading your papers. And so I want to help you to avoid losing points. So I strongly suggest that you watch this entire video. All right, so this is just a sample paper here. The first title of this page, it does not have to be in bold formatting, but it does need to be centered. Make sure you indent the first line of each paragraph, things that you already know. You need to have consistent double spacing flowing throughout your entire paper. I don't want to see big gaps between these paragraphs. There needs to be consistent double spacing. And so I'm going to move down. Notice here is the first heading. This heading, this first level heading, is bold centered. Okay. And if you have a subheading, in other words, another section that's related to it, which you probably won't in this class, to be honest, just keep all your headings centered bold. And that lets me know as the reader, okay, you're shifting in your thoughts, okay, you're changing your thoughts. So that helps me a lot. I also like to see a lot of in-text citations, okay. I know some assignments, they may ask you direct questions that may not necessarily, some of your paragraphs may not need citations. But the way I was taught, to be honest, I'm going to be honest, if you looked at my dissertation, you're going to find a citation in every paragraph, except for of course, my introduction. And then, of course, my last chapter, chapter 5, which was just like a reflection paper. Okay, so I'm going to keep going. Here's an example of an in-text citation at the end of a sentence. I've noticed some of you will put the period in front of the citation. Make sure that you don't put a period in front of the citation. Put it after the citation. That way it is included in that sentence, okay? That's the correct formatting. Don't place the periods before the citation. Always put it at the end of the citation. And this is an example of just one author. Notice you got the open parentheses, author's last name, comma, year, and then close parentheses, period. And make sure you use adequate spacing. Notice there's spacing right there between that comma and the year. And here's an example of a citation at the end of a sentence with a quote. And I do want to mention quotes as it relates to quotes in my class. I can't speak for anybody else, but in my class, quote sparingly. I don't want to see excessive quoting. If I see excessive quoting, I kick the paper back to you, okay? And I want you to take out all that excessive quoting. I want to hear your voice. I want to see how you understand it, how you can synthesize what you learned from the literature, how you can apply it, okay? So quote sparingly. But if you do, here's the formatting, correct formatting of when you do quote from a scholar. And make sure, once again, you're using scholarly resources. All right, so, oh yeah, there is something else in here. So, for example, let's say you have two authors that you wanted to cite. Okay, so like if this was Johnson and Brown, right? And this is just an example for them to put first and second. So if you had Johnson and Brown, comma 1994, okay, you cited it the first time. After that, you can simply put the first author's name and then put ET space AL period comma space 1955 and then close parentheses period. Okay, so you can do it that way after the first mention. All right, if you don't have to keep using that same citation or that same formatting there, I should say. All right, well, again, it works the same way with first, second, third. Like if you got 4 authors, by the way, please avoid putting 4 or more, really 3 or more authors. You can use 3 authors at the beginning of a sentence as far as a citation. Like if you put Johnson, comma, space, Brown, comma, space, Chebet, Chebet, and then space, and then of course your open parentheses, whatever the year is, 1994, then close parentheses, and then you keep going. I'm going to show you a more specific example of that in just a second if you got lost in all of that. Again, here's an example of a citation at the end. Yes, you can have citations at the beginning of a sentence. You can also have them at the end. Really keep it simple. Can you have them in the middle? Yes, but it gets to be a little tricky. And I've noticed that some students kind of struggle with that. All right, so let's see. I think this is pretty much it. Yeah, make sure you have your page numbers in the upper right-hand corner. You got this running head here, and I'm going to show you something about in-text citations. I'm trying to get to the very end. References. So on your reference page, your reference heading does not need to be bold, and it should be centered. This is the type of heading you use for reference page in APA style formatting. And notice how the formatting of the references are. First line of the reference is against the left margin. Your margin should be set at 1 inch top, bottom, left, and right. So your first line is against the left margin. The second line or succeeding lines, like if you had more than, like if you had 2 lines here, then these 2 lines need to be indented. It's called a hanging indentation, and I'll show that to you as well in just a second. And so, yeah, here's an example of succeeding lines. You got more than just a second line. You got a third line. So make sure that first line is against the left margin and second or succeeding lines are indented with that hanging indentation. All right, and make sure, excuse me, that your references are formatted correctly. All right, make sure they are formatted correctly. If you need samples, I can send them to you. We have them. As it relates to our tutorials, I think on the students, there's on your student page in Canvas, they have tons and tons of tutorials. I actually created a couple of those. All right, so that's that. Let me pull up my creme de la creme. When I was in grad school, it's kind of my go-to document. This really helped me format my citations correctly. Notice here, verbs. If you're going to have a citation at the beginning, you want to use different verbs, not the same verb every time. Use different verbs. Wait, where can you find those? Bloom's Taxonomy, to be honest, is a pretty good place. If you go and look up Bloom's Taxonomy verb list, you get tons and tons and tons of verbs. Same kind of verbs, more than likely you're probably using on your resume as well, those lead verbs. But anyway, so here are a few verbs, and I'll make this right here available, this Harvard APA style, kind of like a cheat sheet. And this is part of what I use. I actually created my own cheat sheet, as a matter of fact, when I was in grad school. So use a lot of different verbs. Make sure the verb makes sense. Okay, don't just throw a verb in there. Make sure it's fitting to what you are talking about. Okay, so, and here are some more examples of how you can do that. All right, so now how do you get back to this Word document? So how do you do that hanging indentation, and then how do you do the page numbers? So the hanging indentation, like once you've already typed out all of your references, and by the way, keep in mind, when you put an in-text citation in the body of your paper, I would go all the way down to my reference page at the bottom and go ahead and type that reference out if I were you, because that'll help to keep you organized. I strongly advise that you do not, just put all your citations in the body and then decide, okay, I'm going to do this later, because more than likely you're going to leave a reference out. For each citation listed in the body of your paper, you have to have a reference. Okay, so keep that in mind. Don't forget that. And notice here one more thing. I noticed somebody had their references like right here, like this is where the last paragraph ended and they started their references right there. Nope, you've got to go down to the next page and then start that reference. All right, so let me do this hanging indentation. How do you do? So right here on the paragraph section of your ribbon, I'm on the Home tab of Microsoft Word. I'm going to click on this little paragraph settings icon. It looks like a little arrow pointing down to the right. I'm going to click on it. And so it's going to open. And so it's going to reveal a lot of things that you need to know. First and foremost, I should say, your spacing, this before and after should always be 0, and then your line spacing should be double. So make sure that this is 0, 0, and then this is double. This is the indentation that I was referring to. You don't have to mess with this left and right. Do not mess with this up here. It's only this right here under special. Here it is. Notice it says hanging. And so when you type out that, or really you can just type out all of your references, go ahead and type them all out and then highlight them and then click hanging. And what happens, see the example down here? It shows you what that reference is going to look like. Once you click OK, it'll show you what that reference will look like. There's a sample right there, or a preview of it. And then once you click OK, it will apply it to your reference list. Okay, so that's how you do that hanging indentation. Well, how do you do page numbers? Easy. Go to Insert, click on your Insert tab, and then go all the way over to the far right and click on the page number command right here. And then move your cursor on top of page. Just hover over top of page. Now be careful with this next step. Move over to the left and then come down to plain number 3. The reason why I said be careful is because it's very easy to nonchalant move down the bottom of the page and now you're in the wrong section. So you want to make sure you are here, move over top of page, move over to your left, come down to plain number 3, click on plain number 3, boom. It pops that number, that page number into your paper, and then you can just double click below this dotted line here and it takes you out of that header and you can start typing your paper. And the page numbers, as you add more pages, Microsoft Word will automatically add more page numbers for you. All right. So if you have any questions, any concerns, any challenges, let me know. I am here for you. I'll be glad to help you. I'll chat with you soon.